One thing about crop rotations, with the changes we have, the big changes we have sometimes from year to year in commodity prices and crop prices, it's hard for a farmer to know for sure what he's going to be growing 3 years from now. We're sitting here in February, a lot of farmers aren't sure what they're going to plant this spring. And as far as committing to a certain crop rotation over the next 3 to 4 years, that's hard to do because there are a lot of factors that play into your crop rotation, and certainly you want to rotate your crops as well as possible to break pest cycles, to make sure you're not doing anything to encourage disease or certain weed problems. But at the same time, the number one factor that's going to determine what crops you grow is going to be the market price. And there's no way around that because you've got to make a profit. I think it depends on what your current rotation is. There are certain crops that are very sensitive to being planted one year after another. A good example would be peanuts. It's normally recommended that you only plant peanuts 1 out of 4 years in a rotation. And the reason being is you're trying to break some of the disease cycles. You have certain diseases that can really become a problem with peanuts if you plant them 2 years in a row. Your white mold, your black rot are two that come to mind. So with a crop like peanuts, it's very important that you rotate, that you don't plant it year after year. With other crops such as your cotton, soybeans, corn, rotation can be a benefit in breaking some pest cycles. It also can provide you with the opportunity to do a little better job rotating your mode of action with herbicides. And as we know, if you're using the herbicides that have the same mode of action year after year, that's when you have a better chance of weeds developing that have herbicide resistance. Your pesticide costs may not come down, but your yield should go up. In other words, again, going back to the peanut example, by not rotating your crops when you have peanuts in your rotation, you run the risk of significantly damaging your yield. So it's really important that you rotate your crops with peanuts. With some other crops, it's not as important, but really what you're looking at is the bottom line, getting the best yield you can and hopefully getting the best profit you can. Your herbicide costs, all of your pesticide costs, fertilizer costs, they won't necessarily vary that much due to your crop rotation. That can depend on a lot of circumstances, but what you're trying to do is maximize your yield. Well, you have some situations where soil erosion is not a big problem. You have some tracts of land where there's really not a lot of soil erosion from water or wind. A farmer has been getting what he feels like are good yields from just using a conventional till system. Labor may not be a problem. He may have adequate labor where he has the workforce he needs to continue on with a conventional till system, and there really just hadn't been a lot of motivation to switch. I think it's the idea of if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think we have some people that have fallen into that category. They've been doing it that way for years. Their father did it that way, their grandfather, and it's worked for them, and they just don't really see a need to switch. I think a lot of times other factors come into play that force them to make a change, be it the need for more time, the need to reduce labor costs, fuel costs, perhaps some erosion problems that hadn't come up in the past become a problem. Perhaps they decide they really want to do what they can to improve the soil quality on their farm. There's a lot of different factors that can play into it. But you know, most of us by nature are hesitant to change. We tend to be somewhat resistant to change. And a lot of us also, we don't want to be the first ones to try something. We want to see how somebody else fares with it first. So we may tend to wait and see how it works for our neighbor before we try it. And I think that's been the case a lot of times too, is just a reluctance to change and a desire to wait and see how it works for other people in the area before we spend the money that it takes to invest in the new equipment for strip till. We don't want to make that kind of investment till we're sure it's going to work. I think number one, it is the time management issue. Just the opportunity to save time, to save in your labor and fuel costs. I think that's the number one motivator. You have some situations where there's been an erosion problem in the field in the past, and the opportunity to reduce erosion, to reduce the amount of water and nutrients you have leaving the field, that can be something that motivates the farmer as well. But I think the number one thing is just the opportunity to save on your fuel costs, to save on your labor, and to have more time available. The main savings that a farmer is going to see right away if they switch to a strip till or no-till system is going to be with their labor, with their time, and with their fuel. And of course, now more than ever, we've seen what can happen with fuel costs, with diesel costs the last couple of years, and your overall fuel bill is very critical. And there's no doubt with a strip till or a no-till system, you are going to save on fuel. And obviously, it's going to save on time because there's going to be fewer trips across the field and with labor. And you know, most farmers, they're pulled in a lot of different directions. There's a lot of management responsibilities, and time's very valuable. So any savings there is important. Time has become more important to a farmer now than ever before. And I think one thing that has happened with costs what they are today, with fertilizers, with pesticides, with labor, and also with the low commodity prices we've seen at times, a lot of farmers have been forced to increase their acreage. And obviously, the more acreage you're farming, the more time it requires, the more labor it can require, the more fuel costs that's involved. And I think that is a big reason that a lot of people have looked to switching to the strip till or no-till, because they don't have the time they did 5, 10, 15 years ago when they were farming less acreage. The time is spread thinner. They have bigger labor needs if they're going to farm bigger acreage, and obviously the fuel cost is up, and they're trying to reduce cost as much as possible. So that's been a big factor, I think, in a lot of people switching over to a strip till or a no-till system. That's a factor, and the financial situation varies year to year for a lot of farmers. I mean, commodity prices are a roller coaster. Input costs like fertilizer and herbicides, they're up and down a lot. So you can find yourself feeling like you're in a decent financial situation with minimal debt one year, and a year or two later you have a lot of debt. You haven't been able to show any profit the last 2, 3 years. And when you're in a situation like that, you're very hesitant to invest in any kind of new equipment, to make any kind of change. You're just trying to keep your head above water. So obviously the amount of debt you have, the overall financial situation you have on your farm, that plays a big role in whether or not you're looking to bring in some new technologies or change your farming techniques. In the past, there have been cost-sharing programs that have benefited farmers, that have helped them make the change from conventional till to no-till. Usually they were in the form of annual payments that helped offset the cost of making that switch. And in recent years, those types of payments, that type of cost sharing, hadn't been as readily available. And I think several reasons. One, of course, the budget has been limited nationwide and in the state as far as the amount of funds that were available under some of these conservation programs. And also there was a feeling that conservation tillage or strip till or no-till has been adopted by the majority of farmers in the state, and therefore it really wasn't a conservation practice that should be cost shared on. Currently, there are several programs that are available that in certain situations can provide a farmer with some type of cost sharing or financial assistance if he or she is making a switch from conventional tillage to conservation tillage. There are a couple of programs available that, depending on what the farmer's past crop rotation and residue management system was, there are a couple of programs that are available that can provide some financial assistance to a farmer who's looking to increase the amount of residue he's leaving in the field, and also the crop rotation that's going to be utilized can factor into that as well. So there's potentially some financial assistance available for switching from one residue management and cropping system to another.